Good evening, viewers, and welcome to another program of Political Scope. My name is Stacey Carmichael James, and with me this evening is the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Dr. Ashni Singh. Dr. Singh, it's a pleasure having you on the program this evening.
Thank you very much, Stacey. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're welcome. Now, today we will be explaining the contribution of the private sector to Guyana's economic development. But before we get into the discussion, Minister, I would just like to quote some findings by the World Bank as it relates to Guyana. Now, the first one I would like to highlight, Guyana is rapidly emerging as one of the countries with the highest economic growth rates in Latin America. Guyana weathered the effects of the recent global financial crisis very well compared to other Caribbean countries or the rest of Latin American and Caribbean region. Now, that's just one aspect of what the World Bank had to say about Guyana. It also went on to say that while most economies in the region contracted during the crisis years, that would be from 2008 to 2009, the Guyanese economy recorded an average growth of 4%. Growth is driven primarily by continued expansion in the extractive, agriculture, manufacturing, and construction sectors. And it highlights some more developments. Now, this is a remarkable achievement on the part of Guyana. Could you expound on this development that we've seen over the years, Dr. Singh?
Well, once again, thank you very much. I'm very happy, in fact, that you found and highlighted that World Bank quote. It really is only one of a number of very favorable references made to the Guyanese economy by a number of international financial institutions. And I like those references being highlighted because those are not the words of the Minister of Finance of Guyana or of the President of Guyana, but those are the words of a large, credible international financial institution recognizing the gains that we've made as a country. The quotation is absolutely right in highlighting that the Guyanese economy has grown very significantly over the last, 9 years. That when that quotation was written, obviously 9 years hadn't elapsed as yet. And that growth has been achieved in defiance of a very unhelpful external and regional environment. I will say that as a government, we have been and continue to be firmly committed to private sector-led growth. Our philosophical position is that our duty is to create the conditions that are necessary for attracting investment, private investment, stimulating investment by the private sector, and for facilitating growth and expansion by the private sector, creation of jobs, growth and expansion, generation of incomes, etc. With this commitment to private sector-led growth, which is a firm commitment, we have set about creating the conditions that would make Guyana an attractive place for doing business, both for inward foreign investors and also for domestic investors. And we have seen, I believe, a very tangible demonstration of a favorable response by the investment community to these conditions, these favorable conditions that we've created. We've seen, for example, very significant inward foreign direct investment in a number of sectors, including sectors like natural resources, extractive industries, gold, bauxite, manganese, oil and gas, etc. Even in services, information and communications technology, there's literally a silent revolution taking place in the information and communications technology sector that is little known. It's happening very quietly, but the sector is busy growing and creating jobs. Agriculture, and so many others. At the same time, there's been significant expansion by the domestic private sector. And without a doubt, it's the creation of this environment and in turn the favorable response by the private sector, domestic and foreign, that has led to the sustaining of growth. And so today our economy is no longer dependent on one or two dominant sectors, which it used to be 20 years ago. Today, I believe that the productive base is a much wider one, as is evidenced by the much wider range of productive activities that you see. And so I'm pleased that the investment community has responded as favorably as they have to the conditions that we've created. But I would say, too, looking forward, I would say too that the party that I have the privilege to represent in Parliament remains committed in government, remains committed to, 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 to maintaining these conditions and even further improving them so that we can continue to attract private investment and continue to incentivize and promote private investment for growth.
Thank you, Minister. Now, the 9 years of consecutive growth that Guyana has recorded is, of course, a remarkable achievement for our country. But yet there are still some claims in sections of the media that the national reserves are being used to finance government, to fund government's expenditure. Could you speak to those claims?
Well, some of your viewers may have seen a statement issued by my ministry, I think over the weekend, yesterday or the day before yesterday, that spelt out in, I think, great detail, in a very level-headed, technical manner, the arrangements that are in place for management of the reserves. It appears that the leadership of the AFC, who are the persons who in fact made these statements, are not familiar with the arrangements that govern management of reserves, management of government finances, and so on. That's understandable. Now, this is technical material that not every layperson is expected necessarily to be familiar with. But it would have been useful, I think, for them to acquaint themselves with these arrangements before making the public pronouncements that they did. The fact of the matter is that the foreign reserves are in fact managed by the central bank. They are not available to the government for the purposes of financing government expenditure. They are determined essentially by the external operations of the country, what we call the external account. This is the balance of payments, which is driven primarily by factors like essentially the transactions that Guyana does with the rest of the world, things like on the current account side, our exports and our imports. On the capital account side, things like capital transfers, foreign direct investment, official disbursements, etc. And it goes without saying, and I believe it's widely known, most persons in Guyana would know that gold prices have been dropping dramatically. We saw gold, in fact, about 3 years ago, peak at about $1,800 an ounce. And gold is probably now in the vicinity of about $1,200 an ounce, losing essentially a third of its value. And so we saw, I think it's common knowledge that with gold prices declining, obviously total export receipts would have declined, which would have had a direct and immediate impact on the current account of the balance of payments, in turn would have had an impact on the overall balance of payments, which inevitably would affect external reserves. And so that, I in fact answered that publicly at a press conference that I had about 2 weeks ago. I explained this at length. It appears that perhaps the leadership of the AFC had some difficulty understanding the subject matter, or elected not to acquaint themselves with these details. But the fact of the matter is the reserves are not available to finance government expenditure in the manner that they are suggesting, and fall within the exclusive management of the central bank. I will go further and say that it is in fact to the credit of the Guyanese economy as a whole, not only governmental credit. It is in fact to the credit of all of the economic agents in Guyana, government, of course, as the architects of policy, but the private sector also, those who produce and export goods and services. It is to the credit of us collectively that, notwithstanding the dramatic decline in gold prices, and notwithstanding that gold is such a significant contributor to our economy as a whole, that we were still able to maintain an adequate level of external reserves. The release points out that at the end of 2006, we still had over 3.5 months of imports equivalent in external reserves, amounting to over 3.5 months of imports, which is comfortably above most standard benchmarks, as the release pointed out too. And so the fact that, notwithstanding the external shock of a decline in gold prices, the fact that we were able as a country to maintain and have been able to maintain adequate external reserves is further evidence of the underlying resilience of the Guyanese economy. The fact that a shock to one particular sector would not dislocate the entire economy as a whole. So the AFC really inadvertently and unwittingly perhaps drew attention to, I suspect unintentionally, drew attention to the fact that the Guyanese economy is in fact so, has achieved a degree of resilience that even notwithstanding a shock to external gold prices, we've still been able to maintain adequate external reserves.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the diversity of the private sector has expanded over the years, undoubtedly, from ICT to agriculture and the services industries. How has this impacted the economy?
Well, it's had a tremendous impact from a number of perspectives. First of all, I would say diversification is always a good thing. Because essentially it means that you're not dependent on one or two products. And so we have made economic diversification a principal objective in our policy matrix. We have achieved significant progress in diversifying the economy, notwithstanding that it is work in progress, and we would like, in fact, to see even more gains to be made in diversification. But we're at a point today now where we see the sources of growth being manifold. You still have the traditional industries, sugar, rice, bauxite, and I suppose gold can be described as a traditional industry too. So you still have those 3 or 4 traditional industries, which are important and which we will continue to work to preserve their competitiveness and their long-term viability, profitability, etc. But there's a new economy emerging, things like particularly services and some of the non-traditional areas. You have things like non-traditional agriculture now. Whereas 20 years ago, when you spoke of agriculture, there was no concept like an aquaculture industry. Today you have an aquaculture industry that is vibrant and that is growing, that now is looking at rapidly growing export markets and so on. Today, when we speak of 20 years ago, if you spoke of tourism, there really wasn't a tourism industry in Guyana. Today, there's a very vibrant tourism industry with large new airlines looking at Guyana as a new destination. You know, for example, I think just last year, 2 new Latin American airlines introduced flights to Guyana. Visitor arrivals are going up in Guyana at a time, and they're not, in fact, going up anywhere else in the region, or going up much more slowly in the region. I think the diasporic market is responding in a much more vibrant way than ever before. And of course, we're investing in a new airport, which will see even more rapid growth in the tourism industry, and I'd be happy to come back to that subject if time permitting. You have information and communications technology. You mentioned ICT. It's a little known fact that ICT has in fact created more jobs in Guyana than any other industry or any other sector. And it's also a little known fact that the largest private employer in Guyana is in fact an ICT company, a Mexican company that has created almost 2,000 jobs in Guyana, or in fact in excess of 2,000 jobs. And literally every day you pick up the newspapers and you read of a new investment that's going to create new jobs in this new economy. Just a few days ago, I read in the newspapers about a new call center coming to invest in Guyana to create another 2,500 jobs. The Mexican company that is currently here is currently building a new facility that will see another 5,000 jobs created. And those are not the words, again, they're not the words of government. These are the words of the investors themselves, saying, we believe Guyana is the best place for us to put our investment dollar. We believe that the Guyanese worker is optimally trained and optimally suited to our working requirements. We believe that the policy conditions are suitable and appropriate for us to invest in Guyana. And we are coming to Guyana, investing our money to create jobs for the Guyanese people. These are the words of the investors. They're not my words. You just have to pick up. I think just over the weekend, or less than a week ago, I saw the story of the 2,500 new ICT jobs that will be created by this new company that's entering Guyana. These are large companies. These are very large companies. And then, of course, you have, you have, even at the local level, I say that saving and investment doesn't only happen at the large business level, even at the household level. If you take, for example, our policy in relation to promoting home ownership, And as you know, we have a whole menu of policies. We have a comprehensive policy sort of agenda in relation to home ownership, infrastructural development, lowering the cost of financing, etc. Our policy stance in that sector alone has seen almost 100,000 new landowners in Guyana, probably 50 to 60,000 new homeowners in Guyana, entire new communities being constructed where previously there was abandoned agricultural land. And if you think about the fact that there are a few thousand homes being constructed right now in Guyana as a result of our home ownership policy, our land distribution and home ownership policy, if you consider the fact that every house under construction will probably have at least, I would think, a minimum of 4 or 5 construction workers working on them, then that's literally thousands of jobs being created as a result of our housing policy. And so in just the home construction sector, in the construction sector, within the residential subsector, if you like, you have thousands of jobs being created there. And so it might appear in the first instance to be a housing policy to promote home ownership. But it goes much beyond that, because you promote home ownership, but you see entire new communities emerging. You have construction jobs being created. You have service jobs being created. You have businesses that are going to locate to serve those communities. One just has to look at new communities like Diamond and Grove that have become huge new residential areas. You just have to look at places like Parfait Harmony. I said on another program the other day I was deeply moved to visit, I think it was Parfait Harmony. I went to the school there, and as I was moving through the community, I was impressed and moved to witness so many beautiful homes built by Guyanese families, you know, and these are not wealthy people that have wealthy jobs or owners of large businesses. These are ordinary Guyanese people, employees of businesses or public servants or teachers, or your average Guyanese family building and maintaining beautiful homes, and now migrating from the group of persons that are tenants to the group of persons that are homeowners. And that's a huge migration. That's a huge migration in terms of personal equity. It's a huge migration in terms of self-achievement and self-fulfillment to take the leap from being a tenant to a homeowner. You then own, of course, an asset that you can collateralize. You can subsequently go to the bank and pledge your home for collateral and invest in a business and so on. So they're all very exciting developments that are taking place. Like I said, not just on the business and the large business side, but also even saving and investment on the residential side and on the individual household side.
Okay. Now, Minister, with a few more minutes remaining, could we touch on some of the development projects and how they would further the economic development that we've seen over the past 9 years?
Well, absolutely. Thank you very much for giving me that opportunity. I mentioned the airport project, if I can take that as an example.
Yes, sure.
Sometimes people make the mistake to think that that's just about international air travel, or that's just about bigger airlines being able to come to Guyana. I make the point that the cost of airlift into Guyana is twice as expensive as it should be. For the cost of an airline ticket to Georgetown, Guyana from, say, New York or Toronto, you can travel to Beijing, which is a flight that is 3 times as long as the flight from Georgetown. And the bottom line is that the cost of an airline ticket into Guyana, the cost of air travel into Guyana, the cost of air cargo into Guyana is simply too expensive. The reason it's so expensive is because there is limited competition. Larger airlines and other airlines can't land at Timeri and won't land at Timeri, physically can't. And as a result of it, there's limited airlift and virtually no competition. We have had large airlines come to Guyana and say, we would like to introduce Guyana as a destination from North America, a non-stop destination from North America, but we can't do so because the equipment that we use, the aircraft equipment that we use, cannot land and use an airport like this. If you pause for a minute and you think about the fact that if we were able to facilitate these larger airlines traveling to Guyana, and we were able to achieve a lowering of the cost of traveling to Guyana. Reflect for a minute on what that would do for the volume of visitors to Guyana. And reflect further for another minute on the fact that every visitor coming into Guyana makes an injection into the Guyanese economy. Our statistics indicate that the average visitor into Guyana spends in excess of $1,200 on a visit. And I've said if I were to round that off to $1,000 per visitor, and in a week we had 1,000 additional visitors, that's 1,000 additional visitors injecting $1,000. That's $1 million Guyana dollars a week additionally injected into the economy. Over a year, that's 52 million US dollars, and that's a conservative estimate. Now, where does this money go to? The money goes to hiring taxis, hiring buses or other means of transport, renting cars, means of transportation. The money goes into the shops and restaurants and the markets, or the hotels, indeed, if they stay in hotels. The money goes into the hands of the grandmothers and the grandfathers and the nieces and nephews who will get a little gift that they will go and spend on themselves. The money gets spent at the fishermen who will bring back exotic Guyanese fish that the visitors from the United States haven't eaten for such a long time, or exotic Guyanese fruits and vegetables that they haven't eaten for a long time. That's where the money goes. And with my conservative estimates, that's 52 million US dollars being shared out among these people, essentially being spent in their businesses. So it's the shop owners, it's the taxi drivers, it's the minibus owners, it's the hotel owners in the case of those who stay in hotels. It's the fisherman, it's the market vendor, it's the seamstress or the tailor. And I don't think that the potential impact that that could have is really fully grasped. Because, like I said, that one investment, which could result in additional traffic, will result in this significant injection into our economy, foreign currency coming into our economy, and additional business opportunities for individual small business owners. So the point that I have made elsewhere is that the taxi driver who will scarcely board a plane, probably will travel overseas only once every 5 years or once every 10 years, and has very few relatives interested in coming back to Guyana, even for him. The fisherman who has never traveled overseas and has no plans of traveling overseas and really couldn't be particularly bothered if his family ever came back or not. Even for them, a new airport means additional business opportunities. It means additional income for them. So this isn't only about convenience of travel and people being able to board a bigger plane and so on. This goes to the core of generating business and income for people in Guyana. Ordinary small businesses is the corner shop. We all know, we all have family who visit Guyana, or we see tourists that come to Guyana. What do? They eat in restaurants, they buy food, they take transportation. That's what they do when they visit. That's what people do whenever they visit, wherever. And so it's good for business all around. It's not only about big hotels that will benefit or big business travelers that will benefit. It's the ordinary man that will benefit. And I give that example, but the same can be said of every other project. Let's take the Marriott. The Marriott Hotel is not only about overseas visitors having a fancy hotel to stay at. If you have 150 persons staying in the Marriott Hotel, they have to be fed. Where does that food come from? That food comes from the farmer in Blackbush Polder and the farmer in the Pomeroon. That's where that food, the vegetables and the fruits will come from to feed those 150 persons that are in the hotel rooms and the thousands who will otherwise traverse the restaurants of that hotel. The occupants, the guests of that hotel will require transportation. Every day, every one of them will come down and get into a taxi and go somewhere. Probably, in every likelihood, will use a taxi all day to go from one place to another. That's business opportunity for people. The service providers, the providers of all manner of services. And so, oftentimes a mistake is made, oh, this is a hotel for people to stay at, for visitors to stay at, and that it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. Just imagine, if you have 100 persons staying at the Marriott, that's 100 potential taxi providers. And I only give that as an oversimplified example. But in fact, I mean, and I deliberately choose an oversimplified example. Like I said, those people have to be fed. Restaurants have to be serving food every day. And so every large hotel, in fact, generates significant business multiplier effects throughout the economy. And the same could be said of each one of these projects. And so when we conceptualize a project such as this, we conceptualize it against the background of its very significant developmental impact. Notwithstanding the opposition attempts to derail some of these projects, I will say that our government remains firmly committed to realizing them, recognizing their developmental impact to be as great as they are, as it is. And we will continue to ensure that they do materialize in the shortest possible time.
Thank you very much for those examples, Minister. Now we're near wrap-up time. Are there any closing remarks that you would like to make as it relates to our topic, the private sector's contribution to Guyana's economic development?
Well, I would say that as a representative of the People's Progressive Party civic government that I've had the privilege to serve, I would wish to thank the international and domestic investment community for the confidence that they have shown in Guyana. They have put their capital in Guyana. They've invested. I believe for the greater part they've generated satisfactory returns because they've been expanding. On behalf, indeed, of the Guyanese people, I thank each and every investor who has demonstrated confidence in Guyana for coming to Guyana if they're a foreign investor, or for keeping their money in Guyana and investing in Guyana if they're a domestic investor. I wish to say to them that their investment has not only generated good financial return for them, but in the overwhelming majority of instances, their investment has also generated significant development impact. It is for every additional job that is created, that's a family that is being, whose livelihood is improving, that's potentially a community whose prosperity is growing. I will say to them, particularly as we are in the political season, I will say to them that this, again, the government that I have the privilege of serving, is firmly committed to working closely with the private sector to ensure their continued growth and expansion, their continued prosperity, again, not only with the objective of generating good financial returns for the investor, the provider of the capital, but also ensuring that there is alignment between good investments made by investors and good development impact in the interest of the Guyanese people.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Singh, for that comment. And thank you also for joining me on Political Scope. We do look forward to another interview with you where we could also examine other developments throughout Guyana.
Thank you very much, Stacey. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you so much, viewers, for joining us on Political Scope. My name is Stacey Carmichael. With me today examining the private sector's contribution to economic development was the Honorable Dr. Ashni Singh, Minister of Finance. Do have a good day.